You know, I've been hearing soil organic carbon everywhere lately, but
hmm
I got to be honest, I'm not sure I totally get it. Like, yeah, it's good for the planet, obviously, but past the buzzword, I'm kind of lost. What's the real deal with what's going on down there in the dirt?
It's kind of this whole hidden world, right?
Yeah,
But what's funny is how important it is for everything above ground, too.
exactly. So we've been digging into Farmonaut, this company that uses tech to help farmers.
They're
And
doing really cool stuff.
yeah, from what I've seen, totally. But before we get into all that, let's back up. Soil organic carbon, SOC. What is it? Like, explain it to me like I've never even seen a farm.
Okay, so imagine this. Every little bit of dead plant, every root that gets left behind, even like tiny little insect pieces, it all breaks down and basically becomes like an energy bar for your soil. That's soil organic carbon.
So more energy bars
Yeah.
equals more fertile soil, more life in the soil. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. It's like the fuel that makes healthy plants grow, but it goes way beyond just like bigger plants. Farmonaut's research gets into some wild benefits of increasing these SOC levels.
Okay, so what are the big ones? What makes SOC so amazing?
Well, one of the most impactful benefits is it actually changes how the soil is structured physically. Like, think about soil that's all clumpy and hard to dig in, not good. SOC helps make it more porous, almost crumbly.
So you're saying it's like taking thick, heavy soil and making it like lighter and fluffier.
Yeah, exactly. And that fluffiness is important because it lets the soil basically soak up water like a sponge.
Oh, okay, now I'm interested. How does that work and why does it matter so much?
So good soil structure, the kind that comes from having enough SOC, it means there's space for air and water to move around easily. Think about trying to pour water into a jar of flour versus like a loose pile of it.
So more SOC means the soil can actually hold on to that water way better.
Exactly. Which is huge when you think about how common droughts are becoming, how scarce water is in a lot of places.
It's like giving the soil its own water bottle instead of relying only on rainfall or irrigation.
And that means farmers use less water, there's less runoff that can carry pollutants, it's a more sustainable system all around.
This is already blowing my mind, and we're just getting started. So, healthy soil, thanks to this SOC, means better water. What else can this magic stuff do?
Well, remember all that decomposing stuff we talked about? Turns out that's a big deal for fighting climate change, too.
Wait, really? How does that work?
As that organic stuff breaks down in the soil, it traps carbon that would gone up into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide.
So the soil is like a giant vacuum sucking up the bad CO2.
Exactly, like natural carbon capture. More SOC in our soils means a way to fight climate change.
Wow, okay, that is huge. It's like we've been ignoring this climate solution right under our noses, which makes you wonder, if it's this beneficial, why aren't we doing everything to boost SOC?
It's a great question, right? And it's not like we haven't known about this. It's more that how we do farming, like modern agriculture, hasn't always lined up with keeping soil healthy.
So we've been working against nature instead of with it.
Kind of, yeah. Think about practices like tilling, where they're constantly plying up the soil.
But doesn't tilling help get the soil ready for planting new crops? What's wrong with that?
It does, but it also messes with the natural way soil decomposes and stores carbon. Imagine shaking up a soda bottle, all that gas that was contained explodes out.
Ah, okay, so we're messing up the natural rhythm and stopping it from doing its thing, which includes trapping that carbon.
Exactly. And then there's stuff like climate change itself, which also impacts soil health in a ton of ways. But the good news is people are realizing this, and more farmers are changing how they do things to prioritize the soil.
That's what I want to hear about. Let's talk solutions. How are farmers actually increasing SOC? What are they doing differently?
Yeah. It's really about shifting the whole approach, like from just taking stuff from the land to helping it regenerate. And the ways they do this are super interesting.
That's what I'm excited to hear about. So what are some of these big techniques? We've got Farmonaut's guide here, right?
Yeah, they have a great overview. And one of the simplest but like most impactful things is conservation tillage. Basically the opposite of what we were just talking about.
So less messing with the soil, letting it do its thing.
Yeah. Instead of tilling everything up before planting, farmers are trying to cause as little disturbance as possible. Some are even doing no-till, using special equipment that plants the seeds without all that plowing.
Right, that makes sense, because if you're not churning it all up, that organic stuff stays put. Those little energy bars are still there to feed the new plants.
It's a total shift, working with how decomposition happens naturally instead of disrupting it. And speaking of working with nature, another big one is cover cropping.
Cover cropping, that's where they plant stuff specifically
Yeah.
to help the soil,
Sure.
not to harvest it, right?
You got it. It seems weird at first, but instead of leaving the fields bare after harvest, they plant these cover crops, like legumes, grasses, even radishes sometimes.
Radishes. What's the deal with that?
So different crops do different things. Radishes, they have these long roots that can break up compacted soil, help with drainage. But basically, all cover crops act like a blanket over the soil.
Oh, I can see that. Protecting it from erosion, keeping the moisture in,
Yeah.
like giving the soil its own little sweater.
A very helpful sweater. Plus, cover crops, they block weeds from growing, they can reduce pests, and when they break down themselves, that's even more organic matter going back into the soil. It's a win all around.
So less tilling, cover crops, that's already two big changes. What else is in this sustainable farming toolbox?
Well, there's crop rotation, something farmers have done for a long time, but it's becoming popular again. And it all comes down to diversity.
Diversity.
Instead of planting the same thing in the same field every year, which can use up certain nutrients, they rotate. So like one season it's corn, next it's soybeans, then maybe a cover crop that puts nitrogen back in.
So you're giving the soil a varied diet, kind of like how a natural ecosystem would have all kinds of different plants.
Exactly. And each crop, it has different roots. They affect the soil structure in different ways. It keeps the soil healthy and strong.
That's so cool. So less tilling, cover crops, rotating what you plant. It's like a whole bunch of practices working together.
And just like, an orchestra needs a conductor, sometimes that healthy soil can use a little extra help. That's where organic amendments come in.
Organic amendments. Is that a fancy way of saying compost?
It can be. Basically, composting is like decomposition on purpose, right? Food scraps, yard waste, all that stuff breaks down and becomes this nutrient-rich stuff you can put back into the soil.
Like giving it a superdose of those energy bars.
Exactly. Organic amendments help build up the SOC, they improve the soil structure, and they give all those nutrients to the plants. It's a whole cycle, turning waste into something valuable.
I love that. Okay, so we've got less disruption of the soil, more diversity in what's planted, and then giving it a boost when it needs it. What else are farmers doing to work with nature this way?
This one might surprise you. It involves trees.
Trees.
Yeah.
On farms.
Yeah.
Now I'm picturing like a random oak tree in the middle of a cornfield. Haha. What's the idea there?
Not quite that random. It's called agroforestry, and it's becoming a big deal for boosting SOC and making farming more resilient overall.
So it's not just about the crops themselves, but what you grow around them too. How do trees on farmland actually help the soil?
It goes back to those natural ecosystems, right? Trees, their roots go way deeper, so they're pulling up nutrients that wouldn't normally be accessible and kind of cycling them back up into the topsoil. Plus, when their leaves fall, that's like free mulch, more organic matter breaking down over time.
So it's like adding this whole other level of complexity and benefit to how everything works. And I bet, knowing what we know now about SOC, those trees are also grabbing carbon out of the air.
Exactly. Agroforestry is a really promising carbon sequestration strategy. Plus, trees can be another source of income for farmers. Fruit, nuts, timber. It makes their whole operation stronger.
It's amazing how every step towards working with nature seems to have all these extra benefits for the environment and the farmers. It's not all doom and gloom like we sometimes hear about agriculture.
It's really inspiring to see the innovation happening. And speaking of which, this is where Farmonaut's work gets really cool. They're bringing in some serious tech to boost all these sustainable practices even further.
Okay, tech time. I'm always down to hear about the future of farming. What kind of tech are we talking about?
Imagine this. Farmers can keep an eye on their soil's health from space.
Wait, for real? Are you going to tell me about satellites with giant magnifying glasses attached to them?
Not quite magnifying glasses, haha, but yeah, they use satellite imagery. Farmonaut's tech analyzes pictures from space to figure out how healthy the soil is across huge areas.
That's wild. So instead of taking samples all over the field, they get this big picture view of what's going on down there.
Exactly. And that lets them see if some parts need a little extra help, maybe some compost, a different cover crop, but super precisely and efficiently.
Like X-ray vision for your farm. That's got to be huge for farmers who used to have to rely on way slower, less accurate methods. What else does Farmonaut have in its tech arsenal?
They've also got this thing called Jeevan AI, which is basically like having a personal farming coach in your pocket.
Jeevan AI. That sounds cool. Tell me more.
So it's this smart software program powered by artificial intelligence that takes all the data. Farmonaut is collecting the soil analysis from the satellites, weather info, crop yields, all of it, and gives each farmer specific recommendations.
So not just general advice, but stuff that's tailored to what their farm needs in that moment.
Yep. Like, Even AI might say to plant earlier or later because of the weather, or to use a certain mix of cover crops to fix a nutrient problem, even helps them use the exact right amount of water.
It's like having a whole team of scientists on call 24/7.
All thanks to how powerful data and AI have become.
This is seriously blowing my mind. We started with the tiniest bits of stuff in the soil. Now we're talking about managing farms from space and using AI to make decisions. It feels like we're on the edge of a whole new era of agriculture.
We really are. And here's the best part. There's a growing movement to connect all this sustainable farming to a system that actually pays farmers for doing it. That's where carbon markets come in.
Right, carbon markets. I've heard that term, but I'm not going to lie, I don't totally get how it all works.
So think of it this way. Companies, especially the ones that produce a lot of emissions, they're being pushed to clean up their act. And one way they can balance out those emissions is by investing in projects that reduce carbons somewhere else.
So like a trade-off. They pollute over here, but they pay to clean up over there.
Sort of, yeah. And guess what's a really good way to suck carbon out of the air and lock it away?
Healthy soil. All that carbon sequestration we were talking about before.
You got it.
Yeah.
Farmers who are building up their soil organic carbon can earn these things called carbon credits, which are basically proof that their land is storing carbon.
So it's like a new kind of currency. And farmers can sell these credits to companies that need to offset their emissions.
Exactly. It's still early days. There are things to figure out, but the potential is huge.
It's like this whole new economy is being built, where taking care of the planet is actually good for business, too.
It's about time we started treating healthy soil like the valuable resource it is, not just for growing our food, but for protecting the planet, too.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much, from tiny microbes to satellites in space. It's so clear that soil, organic carbon, it's way more than just dirt. It's key to a healthier planet and a more sustainable future for all of us.
It really is the foundation for everything.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. What we've learned today is that the choices we make every day, from the food we buy to the policies we support, they can have a huge impact on the health of our soil, and that affects the health of the whole planet.
Every little thing we do matters.
So as you go about your day, think about this. What's one small change you can make to help support that incredible world beneath our feet? Thanks for joining us.